Haven't been there in several years. What is that?
Paradise pie. You've never had a paradise pie at Hideaway Pizza?
Huh?
You have not lived.
What is it?
It's basically a chicken bacon type pizza with a lot of cheese. It's really, really good.
Paradise? Can you remember that?
Hand tossed paradise pie.
Hand tossed paradise pie. Yeah.
Well, it don't have no pineapple.
Okay, good.
But as far as the bacon and the chicken and the mozzarella cheese.
Wow. Well, I haven't.
If you don't like it, I'll buy you whatever pizza you want.
I like their mushrooms. Yeah. Good. We are in Genesis chapter 45. And this is the 81st study in the book of Genesis so far since we started. And we're thankful for the rain, but we're hopefully that it's going to stop for a few days. But we're thankful for the rain. Also, keep praying for JW. He's doing better. He is in Bartlesville now at Ignite. Isn't that the name of it? Ignite Rehab or whatever. So if you get a minute, go by and see him. He would appreciate it. I think it's 504 is the room. And if you don't know where that is, it's right off Adams. But we're in chapter 45 tonight. We're back in the book of Genesis. And chapter 45 is the reveal of Joseph to his brothers. And his brothers are the 12 tribes of Israel. And we've looked at the different typology throughout this study of Joseph being a type of Jesus. And I believe he's the greatest type of Jesus in the Old Testament. And there are many theologians that have found way over 100 different ways that the story of Joseph puts Joseph as a type of Jesus. And in chapter 45, you will, if you're looking for them, you'll see several in this chapter. And it'll have to do with Jesus Christ revealing himself to the 12 tribes of Israel under the preaching of the 2 witnesses and the 144,000 young virgin male evangelists during the 7-year period of Jacob's trouble. So that 7-year period after the rapture that most people call the tribulation, we try not to do that because it's not biblically correct. There's 3.5 years of the end of it is great tribulation. Actually, the first 3.5 years looks like it's probably pretty good. But it's all biblically Jerusalem-centered. And God sends 2 witnesses, and nobody knows who they are. But I can assure you there's no one here. Some theologians think it sounds like the miracles that they do, it sounds like Moses and Elijah. Some people think it's Elijah and Enoch because those 2 guys are the only people that never died but got taken up. But that's not a very good argument because everybody that gets raptured is not going to die. And both of those guys had to be transformed, and both of those guys went to Abraham's bosom, I believe. And they couldn't for sure go to heaven in their earthly bodies. So, but some people believe it'll be Enoch and Elijah. because the Bible says it's appointed unto man once to die and then the judgment. I don't know. It may not be any of them. It may be just two people that's not in the biblical history. And the book of Revelation never says anything about their coming back or they're reincarnated or anything like that. But it does say there'll be two witnesses. God will protect them, and they'll preach Jesus in Jerusalem to the Israeli people. And that, accompanied with 144,000, is what brings the remnant of the Jews to belief in Jesus Christ. And halfway through that 7-year period, the Antichrist will, of course, turn on those and try to slaughter those along with other people. So you'll see the types of this. Also, you'll see types of the sinner coming to Jesus. You'll notice that Joseph doesn't reveal himself until they admit and confess their sins. And so this is so many types that you see when you start looking at the Bible that way. And remember, Jesus is coming back to Jerusalem. He's not coming back to Washington County. He's not coming back to Washington, D.C. He's not coming back to the Vatican. He's not coming back to Buckingham Palace. He's coming back to Jerusalem. Now look at this verse in Zechariah 12:10. Zechariah 12:10 says this. Watch. And I will pour upon the house of David. Now, who is that? Is that the Scottish? No. Is that the Polish? No. That's got to be Germany. No, it's the house of David. And upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced. Now that's a very important thing. Somebody might be able to look it up, but I believe Zechariah was written something like 600 years before Christ's birth. But this talks about being pierced. It's one of those prophecies that you put together with other prophecies in the Old Testament, and you can clearly see that the crucifixion of Jesus was prophesied. Remember, Jesus says that the Old Testament was about him. And after the resurrection, he taught them for 40 days how the Old Testament spoke about him. I bet this was one of those scriptures. Also, another thing I'd like to point out, when you're reading this, it says he's going to pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplication, and they shall look upon me. Now, in the Hebrew, not in the modern Hebrew, but the old original Hebrew that we have, it has two letters after that word that they translated me. It's very proper to translate it me, and God speaking about himself. It could have also been translated the one. But what's cool, I think, is after that word that they translated me, there's just two letters. Two Hebrew letters. The first letter and the last letter of their alphabet. The Aleph and the Tau. Now, so when you read it like that, it says, and they shall look upon me, the Aleph and the Tau, the beginning and the end. It's just another proof that this verse is a very important prophecy of Jesus says, whom they have pierced. And they shall mourn for him, as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him, as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. Now, we've been on this thing, and I think it's unique, and I think it's cool. Look at Zechariah 13:6, just the next chapter over. Now watch this. And one shall say unto him, what are these wounds in thy hands? Then he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Now, I'm sure you guys all know that verse. You've probably heard that before. So when he comes back, one of the things they're going to ask him is, where did you get the wounds in your hand? Something I've always wondered, and I don't have an answer for it, but if he has the scars in his hands, I would assume he has the scars on the rest of his body. And me and Alan was talking about the Shroud of Turin. He was asking me if I thought it was real. And I don't know if you've done much studying on it. A few years ago, I studied on it quite a bit. Man, if it isn't real, I don't know what it is. But one of the things on the Shroud of Turin, they can pick out over 50 scars on the person's head. And they believe that the crown wasn't a circle twisted together, but a kind of like a hat that was shoved down on his head. So whoever this person was in this burial cloth was of the same period of time. It was a male. He was beaten, scourged, brutally beaten, had a crown of thorns, was crucified, had a wound in his side from that same area, from the pollen they found. So I'm like, I don't know. I mean, if it ain't him. Plus, they can't even figure out how the image got infused on the cloth. But it's a neat study. It isn't something you need to know to, or an aid for worship or something, but it is neat. But the person in the shroud was crucified. He's got holes in his hands and feet. Yet there's always been this push to do away with the crucifixion. And this word that's translated in the King James Bible, hands, is translated in the Old Testament alone, in the Hebrew, over 800 times, either hand or hands. Now, if you translate a word 800 times in multiple different books, I would say that's the meaning of it. But let me show you something. Look at the same verse in the NIV Bible. And one shall say unto him, what are these wounds in? Yeah, it's no problem. Huh? Yeah. What it says, he'll find it. What it says is body. It's never translated body, except in this one verse. I think it's the RSV translates it chest. The Living Bible, David Taylor translated it, I think, chest and body, chest and back, maybe. If someone asks, what are these wounds on your body? Now, if you're a young person like I was when I got saved, I was 13, and probably my mom or something. Somebody gave me an NIV Bible, And that's what I had for a long time. You know, if you're just reading that, you don't see anything wrong with that, because Jesus had identifying wounds all over his body. You got to understand what I call Christianese. They switch these words out, and when you read it, it sounds Christian. For example, in Acts chapter, I think it's 7, when they stoned Stephen. Stephen's the first martyr. And the Bible says that Stephen was a man full of faith. And when you research that thing out, there was a Pentecostal group headed by the Assemblies of God that had that section in the NIV to translate. Well, they had a problem, because when you're in the faith movement, if you've got enough faith, you can ask God for anything. And you sure don't get stoned to death if you're full of faith. Think about it. I mean, if you're full of faith, you can say to this mountain, be removed, and it's cast into the sea. How can a man full of faith? Yeah, Kenneth Copeland tells tornadoes to get up off the ground. You know, he's a demoniac. So they changed the word because they couldn't leave it. So in your NIV Bible, it says that Stephen was a man full of grace. Well, when you're just reading it, you're a Christian person, man full of grace. Grace is a Christian word. But grace and faith are two different totally things. And things that are different are not the same. Now, how do you know that grace and faith are totally different? First thing is they're spelled different. That's your first clue. But you're right, Peggy, they're not even close to the same thing. For example, grace and mercy are different, but they're so close, sometimes people get them mixed up. So like Peggy said, grace is something given to you without you doing anything for it, or sometimes we call it unmerited favor. You can't do anything for it. It's grace. It's a free gift. Now mercy, so grace is getting what you don't deserve. Mercy is not getting what you do deserve. So David J. leaves here and, runs somebody over and drives them over, and some of those idiots on this road on their bicycles, and he hits them and runs them over. And he could be prosecuted for manslaughter. But it was an accident. And the judge takes into consideration, this person on this bicycle was riding on the Gap Road. And so he gives him mercy. Mercy is not getting what you deserve. Grace is getting what you don't deserve. They're two different things, but they're close. But faith is a totally different thing. So they just change the words and you don't recognize it. Well, the wounds, why are these wounds on your body? What does that do, and what's the big deal? Because he did have wounds on his body. Because it takes away the prophecy of him being pierced in his hands. Crucifixion, Psalms 22 was written, a description of crucifixion before crucifixion was invented. So if you start taking these prophecies apart and using different words, they lose their specificness. So that word they said body over 800 times was hand or hands. Now, I just want to show you this again. All other translations, they don't say hands. That work is an unhonest devil to translate with an agenda the same word 800 times as hands, But when it comes to Jesus' return, they say body. And I want to show you this article again. Now, this is Christianity Today, which was founded by Billy Graham. And this guy is a writer and a theologian and a professor in a seminary. And he wrote a whole article on why Jesus crucified with nails. And we're not going to look at it and read it again, but I just wanted to show you. He says he was probably just tied on there. Well, there's several verses that say different. These are the people teaching the preachers. So, God is not through with Israel. He's not through with them as a nation, and He's not through with them as a group of people, individuals that some will believe on Him. Look at Luke 21:24. Luke 21:24 is the only gospel that says this. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. Luke is prophesying this, and this happened just a few short years after he wrote this. In 70 A.D., this was fulfilled. They fell by the edge of the sword, and they were led away into captivity into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now, this happened before, when the nation was trodden down and they were carried away into Babylon. I believe that's when the time of the Gentiles began. But specifically, he's talking about in 70 A.D., then they were scattered. So the times of the Gentiles, I believe, was from 606 B.C. at the Babylonian captivity until 1917 at World War I, when the Balfour Declaration was written and England gave the Jews back part of their homeland. Look at Romans 11:25. God's not through with them. For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits. Here's what you don't need to be ignorant of. Blindness, in part, is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. So this is another verse about this period of time called the fullness of the Gentiles. Now, some theologians think that there's a certain number of Gentiles saved, and that's the fullness of the Gentiles. I don't know. I don't know if that's... I don't go down that road, because after the resurrection of Jesus, there's three groups of people. There's the Jews, according to God. There's the Jews, there's the Gentiles, and there's the born again. What he calls the church. But that's made up of Jews and Gentiles. All different races. There's that third category now. I believe in 1917, World War I, there had never been a world war. Something changed. And I think God was through with the Gentiles as far as focusing on them primarily. And from that point on, he turned his face toward Israel. And it's been about Israel ever since. Now, in 1917, most of them didn't want to go there. And so there's that old saying that World War I got the land ready for the Jew, and then World War II got the Jew ready for the land. But it's been God's agenda since World War I of this little nation over there. And that's primarily his concern. Now, you need to be thinking with your head on a swivel, because the next 48 hours could be life-changing for everybody. because India and Pakistan, they're at the point of no return. You say, well, what'll happen? They're threatening to go nuclear. You got all this stuff happening all over the world. China's about to go into Taiwan. North Korea is always doing something stupid. Ukraine, Russia, and Europe. Israel and Iran. Israel trying to get the United States to fight their battle in Iran. At least Donald Trump's so far, holding them out. If you haven't figured it out, that's all we do is fight the wars for Israel. And they're a bunch of devils. That's why Jesus is coming back to destroy them. People can't get that through their head. Now you got Pakistan and India about to go nuclear. How many of you heard about Israel bombing the port there in Iran? Well, it was a port full of chemicals. And all of them are leaving and scattering that area. And it's crazy because just the other day I was reading in Jeremiah 49. And it talks all about the scattering of Elam. That's Iran. And then chapter 50 is the tribulation. Well, is that happening right now? I don't know. I don't know nothing, right? Look at this. And so all Israel shall be saved. Now, does that mean that every Jewish person will be saved? No, that's not what that means. That means when he comes back and the dust is cleared, all of Israel that's left will be saved. Does that mean that Jewish people today don't have to believe on Jesus and they're saved? No, that is not what that means. People say, well, I think it does. Well, you're a fool. Jesus told the number one Jew in Jerusalem in John chapter 3, Nicodemus, you must be born again. If any Jew could have made it without Jesus, it'd have been Nicodemus. Don't you understand that's the first 10 chapters of Acts was sharing the gospel with Jews. Why? Because they need to be born again. They need to believe on Jesus Christ. What does this mean? It means when they start the millennial reign, all Israel will be saved. And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer. That's Jesus. And shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. That's another name for Israel. And that's what we're talking about. Jacob, or Israel, and his 12 sons, one primary son, Joseph. For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. As concerning the gospel, they are enemies for your sake. But as touching the election, they are beloved for the Father's sake. Who's the elect? The Jew. It's not the church. The Jews are the elect. Elect of the Father. Now, let's go to where we headed at the beginning. Genesis 45. It's a great story. It makes a great play. And it's just interesting. All the different things that you can find as a type of the return of Jesus. Now, if you see something that jumps out at you, holler, okay? I'm pretty used to getting interrupted. So here we go. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him, and he cried, cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him. while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. Now, who did he run out of the room? All of the servants. Remember, we talked about it last time. The servants were there to serve him. He had saved all their lives and all the known world. But they were so racist, they wouldn't eat at his table. Racism's crazy. Racism makes you do things and think things that don't even make any sense. Here's the guy that saved you all, but it's an abomination to eat with him. It's crazy. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, now, up until this point, he's never spoke to them in Hebrew. He spoke to them through an interpreter so that they wouldn't know that he knew Hebrew. Put it all together. Now, he doesn't look like he used to. He's several years down the road. His whole body's shaved. He's probably got on eyeshadow. Remember Yul Brynner and Telly Savalas? Which one was it that played it? And he's dressed in the Egyptian garb and everything. But then he just comes out in the Hebrew and he says, I'm your brother Joseph. I bet they about fell out. I am Joseph. And then he asks, doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. They were speechless. And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now, did he have to say that? He's going to forgive them, that's for sure. But not till he gets his pound of flesh. Now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves, that you sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years, in the which there shall neither be, that's plowing, nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him, thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. And there will I nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. And ye shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that ye have seen, and ye shall haste and bring down my father hither. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brethren, and wept upon them. And after that his brethren talked with him. And the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come. And it pleased Pharaoh well, and his servants. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, say unto thy brother, this do ye, lad your beast, and go get unto the land of Canaan. And take your father and your households, and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat the fat of the land. Now thou art commanded, this do ye, take your wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Also regard not your stuff, for the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. And the children of Israel did so. And Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandments of Pharaoh, and gave them provision for the way. To all of them he gave each man changes of raiment. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of raiment. And to the father he sent after this manner: 10 asses laden with the good things of Egypt, and 10 she-asses laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. So he sent his brethren away, and they departed. And he said unto them, see that you fall not out by the way. Don't get distracted. And they went up out of Egypt and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And Israel said, here's one of those examples I'm always telling you about. This chapter it says, Jacob, 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 Jacob. But when he does something spiritual, it changes his name to Israel. But it's talking about the same guy. And Israel said, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. Jacob's a big Debbie the Downer. Now I want to ask you something. The Bible, I'm sure, doesn't record everything they said to their father. But do you think they admitted to him what they had done before they got there? I mean, do you think they told him the whole story before they got there in front of Joseph? Would you? It doesn't say they did, does it? Doesn't say anything about it. So let's take this into consideration. Put yourself in the donkey's place that had to carry all the gifts from Egypt to Jacob's house in Canaan land, just to show Jacob that what they were saying was true, and then turn around and have to carry it all the way back. But isn't that your life? I can tell you it's been my life. You're up here, and then when you least expect it, you're down here. And it seems like you stay down there forever and you can't get back up. And then something good will happen in your life, and you'll feel like you're on the mountaintop. And after so many multiple hundreds of times, you figure out, when I'm up here, I really need to cherish it because it's not going to last. And I think that's what's one of the things that'll be so sweet about heaven, is you'll be up here and you'll stay up here. But I want you to put yourself in Jacob's shoes for just a minute, and then we'll go to Hideaway Pizza. And all we got to do is tell Richard we didn't like it, and he said he'd buy something else. You're an old man. His life's been like this his whole life. He's lied and cheated and tricked and even wrestled with God. Who would have the audacity to try to wrestle with God? And I don't think they said a word to him about what they had done. So the whole trip, he's just every step he's motivated by he's going to get to see his son. All this time he thought he was killed by an animal. And I was very honest with you what I felt about that. I didn't think he was much of a dad. He didn't go looking for him. They wasn't that far away. Just because you see a bloody coat, you're just going to assume your son's dead? Nothing else, you look for the body. But he didn't. That's because he was a very selfish, self-centered person. But every step, I think he's motivated. I'm going to finally find out what happened to him. And I bet you he said something like this: God has kept him. God has protected him. You want to talk about feeling like a fool? Imagine what he feels like when he gets there. It's funny that this Bible says his heart failed him. Have you ever been in a situation when you felt like you was having a heart attack? Isn't it funny how your heart can feel like it's going to stop because of joy? And also, it can feel like it's going to stop because of despair. Have you ever thought about why God made us that way? When something happens in our lives that's emotional, the body reacts in a chemical way. You know, you can laugh so hard that you cry. And you can have your heart broken and you can cry. Why does your eyes do the same thing in totally different situations? I don't know. But I just see him, he gets there, and I'm sure they had a wonderful time of hugging and loving on each other. And then I think Joseph told him. Now, this man is up here. He's going to see his son. He's not dead. He's going to live out the rest of his life with his son, and his family's complete. And the son he thought was dead and taken from him, it was his heartstrings, because it was the son of his wife that he really loved. And then when he gets there, it should be a magnificent moment, but it has to be a plummeting thing to think, I've been living with these 10 jokers. I've been feeding them. They made a fool out of me. And now I'm supposed to just go over here and live with them the rest of my life? Do you think he held a grudge? Do you think he resented them? I would like to say that would be a colossal waste of time. And I think you'll see in the next chapter that Joseph tries to let them off the hook. And he says it was God's plan. And he tries to tell them. But you'll notice he tells them over and over and over, it's okay. What you meant for evil, God used for good. It's okay. Don't worry about it. I think there's primarily two things that probably changed the heart of Joseph. And I think they were his two sons. Because there ain't nothing in your life that can change you like having a child. it does a lot of things. It changes your perspective and it puts things in order. And you begin to prioritize different things if you're a person that's seeking after God. And I think it's like the miracle that happens when a woman has a baby. You know, they talk about how painful it is, and I'm sure it is. But when they lay that baby on your chest and you get to hold it and you get to hear it, and it has some kind of miraculous way of helping you forget the pain. And that's proof because women have multiple kids. I've dealt with people throughout my illustrious career, and you try to give them the gospel and what we used to call win them to Christ. And I've dealt with several people that didn't want to come to Christ, and they wanted to seem like a martyr because they told me they had out-sinned the love of Christ or the blood of Christ. And they tried to seem humble and like it would be a disgrace for them to ask God to forgive them because they were so terrible. And to me, it's just pseudo-humility. It's actually that they don't want to give up their will. But I think the lesson here is somehow his brothers and his dad and himself need to find grace for each other and put that behind them so they can spend the rest of their life in some kind of a loving situation and not waste the rest of their life that was wasted before because of their sin. That's the gospel of Jesus Christ. It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. What matters is what you do from this point on. And if you cannot sever your life from your past, then your past contaminates your future. And every person ought to hear that good news message that your life can be different and changed. You don't have to be a malignant carrier of the sin of your past. But it's not easy. They lived their life out. They all passed away. And for 430 years, their family grew into a nation. It's one of the greatest stories in the Bible. But the thing you need to get from it is, it's a type of the forgiveness of Jesus Christ. Because they were all guilty of selling him, of telling the Father he was dead, contriving this story. And when we come to Christ, we're guilty. And Christ's message to us is, it's okay. That's why I came. So you intended evil, and I intended to come and make it good. So that's the gospel of Jesus Christ. Great story. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for these people. God, we thank you that our brother J.W. is doing better, and we thank you that Lois is in your house, and we're so thankful for that. We just ask you to be with us, and we lift up the people in surrounding areas that are flooded. We just pray that you be with them in this time, and we thank you for each and every person here tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.